Hi guys, this is Tony and we're back on the bench. And this evening we're going to be doing a walkthrough service on a pretty rare reel here. So we're looking at a Damn Quick Royale MDS, that stands for Magnetic Drag System, spinning reel. This is the model 2500, a beautiful mahogany wood box, special limited edition. I don't for surely know how many of these were made, but I don't believe there's a lot of them floating around out there. This reel also came with all its original documentation here, and I've got a schematic, and it's all in German. This reel was made in West Germany. But we're going to do this walkthrough service, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the roadblocks that I hit working on it during the service of it. So this reel, it was used. You can tell it's got some scratches and some rub marks and whatnot, but it was in decent shape when I picked it up recently. And the guy that it belongs to, I said I'd do a service for, and there were a few things that had to be noted right out the gate. For starters, originally you couldn't turn it. Okay, so now we can turn it. That's not a problem. But it was literally frozen. I could not turn this at all. Eventually, I was able to free it up, so that's not a problem anymore. But that's usually a result of just poor reel maintenance. The old grease in here got kind of into like a tar like configuration, if you will, and it just made it so you couldn't turn it. So that was one problem. And then we'll talk about some of the other issues that I ran into taking it apart here. So we're going to start with the simple stuff here. So we can take our spool off here. So just this spool alone, there's a few things to this here. So you essentially need a special tool to remove this top cap and ring. And in this case, my special tool is going to consist of two tools. It's going to be this and this, because I don't have that special tool, unfortunately. So I'm going to show you what we do to take this apart so that we can get into all the washers and the magnetic drag assembly that's in here. All right, so you need that stubby screwdriver underneath here to hold right there in place the shaft. Okay, and then we're going to take these needle nose pliers and we're going to gently apply some pressure here and turn this inner wheel. And as you can see, it does have a tendency to slip, but we got it loose, and that's all you need to do is just get it loose, and then you can spin it off. Okay, so we've got a top cap here, and there is a fiber washer that's kind of attached to this, so you want to make a note of that. I do highly recommend with any fishing reel to get the schematic, especially this one, I will say, though, just because of its intricacies in the way that it goes together. This is a unique system because it's a magnetic drag system. That's not your everyday thing, for a spinning reel. Okay, so now sometimes you can pull this off gently. Sometimes you might need the help of a pair of needle nose pliers just to kind of unpry it, because the magnets are right there. All right, so this is a whole disc right here. And unfortunately, these magnets are rusted, and there's not much that we can do about that. Okay, but it is still workable. It does work. And so we're going to put that back there. Okay, and this whole assembly here can pretty much stay together. Now make note, in here there are washers and a snap ring in here. Okay, and in order to get those out, it's really simple. You just need to get a small screwdriver in here to take out this snap ring. The snap ring comes out like so. Okay, and then there's these three washers in here, and these are concave washers, tension washers, if you will. Okay, and they're all the same, essentially. So you just want to make a note of that. You want to clean all this up in here if there's any residual grease or dirt, sand, things of that sort. Okay, and then all this goes back in accordingly. And so that's part of the service, but relatively simple design, actually. Okay. Then for the rest of these parts, so you've got your shaft here, and then there's also this wheel as well as this corked washer here. All right, and you want to just make sure that this is intact, so to speak, all these pieces and parts here. Okay, and clean off any dirt or anything of that sort that's hung up in here, of course. Okay, and then these pieces can go back like so. And then put your shaft back in place like so. And then we'll put our top cap back on. You want to make sure you clean this the best that you can. You can see that there's some rust marks from this. And again, this is a result of poor reel maintenance. I'm not sure, where this reel was, from its, original, ownership, so to speak, but this is a typical thing that happens, when your reels just don't, get the love that they really need. And so it's a pretty common problem. And the way that it can be avoided is do regular maintenance on your reels and make sure that you rinse them off. If they're used in salt water, rinse them off with warm fresh water. Very simple thing to do. And part of the purpose of these videos is to show you, how to take these mechanical devices apart so that you can use them for a long time to come, hopefully. So that's the whole idea behind it. So at this point, we're ready to reattach everything. And we're just going to take this top ring, we're going to thread that back on like so. Then we'll go back to our stubby screwdriver. We're going to hold that in place while we just turn this knob back on and just give it just a little turn. It doesn't have to be a lot, just enough to make it snug, and that's all you need to do there. Okay, so relatively simple, not the typical design though that you would see on a spinning reel. So now we can get into the rest of the reel here. So this is a pretty typical quick design here. 3 screws that attach to this handle here. So we're going to take those out next with the regular slotted screwdriver. But yeah, this reel is an interesting one because it strikes me as a reel that might have the potential to be worth a lot in terms of a collectible item. However, due to its lack of maintenance, it kind of veers away from that a little bit, just because there was quite a bit of work that had to go into servicing the reel internally, at least. And that's part of what we're going to talk about here as we do this disassembly. Okay. Also make note, there are 3 screws here, and one of them is slightly shorter than the others. And it's a very, very minute difference, but it does matter. And that shorter one needs to go here, right where it meets the stem right here. Okay. Now, at this point, we're going to pull this side plate off. Make note that this badge comes off separate as well, because those 3 screws go in there accordingly. Okay. And then we have the inside of the reel. And, it's pretty cleaned up now. It's in good shape now that we've worked on it. I really wanted to do a video on this as I was taking it apart, but it would have been difficult and very time consuming, because the first problem I ran into was right here. This pin, or in this case screw, which is right here, very difficult to see. This is actually a really, really small Allen head. Okay. And it's this size, whatever this is. It's very, very small, metric. Okay. And unfortunately, the head here got stripped. and I couldn't get it out. And, it didn't really appear to be like severely rusted or anything like that. However, if you look at the schematic actually indicates that that screw is a regular slotted screw, and that's just not the same. It's not the same thing. And so I looked at that more carefully in these blow-ups here. You can actually see it right here. It's actually a slotted screw. So I don't know if somebody's been here before or not. It's possible. We won't ever know. But the bottom line is I didn't have a screw to work with to take out, really. So that resulted in having to take a very small drill bit and drilling out that screw so that we could get it out, and then deal with having to do a replacement. Now, I did originally try to replace it with a different screw that had the correct thread. That, however, did not work because the screw head was too thick and it was sticking out too much, and it was rubbing the rail here. Okay, so that wasn't going to work out okay. So what I ended up doing is taking this spike peg here that came off of a different reel, and it works just fine. You set it down there in the hole, and you just line everything up, and it's not going to come out once the lid is on. So that's a perfect fix for it. It's it's unfortunate anytime you have to drill something out, but that's what it resulted in, and it had to happen in order to service the reel, because if you can't take that out, you can't take the rest of the reel apart. Okay, you have to get this cam out. Okay, so that's the next step, is to take that out. So there's a little snap ring here that has to come out, and you don't want this to go flying away on you. Okay, so you've got that snap ring. You're going to take that piece out. And then there's also a washer that has to come out as well. At this point, we can pull our drive shaft up. We should be able to. There we go. And then we just got to get this small washer out of here. This is where small needle nose pliers comes in handy sometimes. Okay. Excuse me. So there's our cam, and it's in good shape. There's nothing wrong with it. Okay. So now we're at the point where we can pull our main gear out. Okay. Now the main gear on this is actually attached to the handle assembly. You want to make note that there is a washer here, and you don't want to lose it. Okay. Now, I've also found that it's actually not really necessary to take apart the rest of this, but if you want to, there is a stud here that you have to punch out. I'm really not a big fan of using hammers on fishing reels unless I have to. So I didn't have to resort to that. But, if you found a need to do that, if there was, something broken in here, essentially you've got a couple of rings and a spring in here, and that's it, but there was really no need for me to do any of that. Okay. So main gear's attached to that, and that's in good shape. And then we've got the Phillips head screw to take out so that we can get our rotor off of here. So we'll take that off next. And then this nut is, I believe, a 14 millimeter. No, not that one. 11. I'm sorry. This is part of what happens when you start working on multiple reels all at once. And there's been quite a few on the bench lately. Okay, so rotor nut comes off. Rotor comes off. We check under here, make sure it's clean. Okay, now for this section here, this is where it got kind of hard. So there's two washers here that you need to make note of, two copper washers, and then there's a bushing here that has to come off. Now originally I could not get that bushing off of here. It was rusted on there. So that was a big problem. I did apply some penetrating oil, still couldn't get it out. snap ring pliers. I'm just going to tell you about the story as we go here, basically. Okay, but you need those snap ring pliers to get that ring out. Okay. Now there's also this anti-reverse plastic snap here, and you have to just kind of gently pry that out with a pair of needle nose. Okay. And then at this point, there's a couple of more rings in here that you need to get out. There's this tension washer here. Okay, so you got the tension washer, and then there's a brass washer in here as well. It's very thin, but you should be able to pull this whole assembly out. So both the bushing and the ball bearing were fused to this stud here, this main shaft, and you can still see there's some residual rust there. We freed it up, thank goodness, but it was a problem. And what I ended up having to do is I had to take like a 2x4, drill a hole in it about the size of this shaft, okay, and then set this down in there to the point where the bearing stops it, and then spray some PB Blaster on there, let that soak for a while, and then take another small board to the top of this, and then take like a mallet or a small hammer and tap on it a few times, and then it comes right apart. But it was a little bit time consuming, and this is again what happens when you don't service your reels and you don't take care of them. Now the main bearing, it's in great shape. There's no problems there whatsoever. Okay, so there's all of our pieces and parts. The rest of this, all you need to do is clean up in here, right? Unless there's damaged springs or levers here, there's no need to really take any of the rest of that out. So you want to take some Q-tips and some paper towels and clean up in there. And then when you're done with all that, you're ready for reassembly. So we'll just go back in the reverse order, okay? And we'll go through all the steps here. So first off, we're going to take some real oil to this bearing here, and we're going to flood that with a little bit of that. Again, I've already done all this, so I'm not necessarily going to apply everything in its entirety, but just so that you can see how the process works. I'm going to slap that back on there, and then before we go any further, take just a little bit of real grease, Penn Precision Blue Grease in my case, and just put a little bit of that on there. Now, make note, this is important. You do not want to get grease here. You want it here, not here. Okay, and the reason for that is because when you go to put this anti-reverse clip back on, you don't want it sliding too easily, because if you do, it's going to mess up the mesh. It's going to fall back, and it's going to fall back into the main gear. Okay, I speak from experience with this, and so you don't want to make that mistake. Okay, so keep it dry there, and just apply a little bit of grease right there, and that's all you need to do. Okay. And the other thing that you want to make note of is, you just want to make sure that, all these pieces and parts are as clean as possible, of course. Use WD-40, penetrating oil, whatever you have, and, clean things up. Clean things up with 4-0 steel wool, with paper towels, toothbrushes, brass wire brushes to clean the gear teeth out, things of that sort. Okay, so now we're going to go back and we're going to put all this back in place as such. I also find it's helpful to clean the inside of this housing. Okay, and then we're ready to put our snap ring back in position. I highly recommend having one of these snap ring tools if you're going to do this kind of work. It just makes a load of difference. And we'll put that back in position like so. And sometimes you gotta work this around a little bit with the help of a small screwdriver sometimes. Like so. Make sure that that's in there nice and flush. Okay. And then our bushing can go back in place like so. And then our washers. Okay. Relatively simple. Now, before we go any further, we want to do a quick inspection of our bale assembly and rotor and whatnot. We want to clean up anything that, doesn't look like it belongs there. Just do a little bead of Real X oil along these seams here. Okay, so that can work its way in. And then also check your line roller. In this case, this line roller is in really good shape, actually. But if you wanted to gain access to it, you would take that screw out gently and then pull the line roller off and clean the bushing that it rides on in there. And then you could apply just like a small bead of oil right there and then put that back on and you're good to go. I do have a separate video on that topic for those of you that want to see it in more detail. You can check that out on the YouTube channel. And then we're going to snap this back on gently. And we'll put our rotor nut back on, that 11 millimeter rotor nut. Be gentle doing this. You don't want to apply too much force, but we want to be able to get a set screw in here in one of these holes. We'll go back here. And that's to prevent the nut from loosening up, of course. So it's helpful. Now, before we go any further, what we want to do is we want to put this piece back in. Okay, and again, we're just going to make sure that it's dry up here where it goes on the shaft. Okay, and then that piece is going to go back in accordingly, and it should just kind of snap back in, so to speak. Okay, and the whole point of this is so that that stem hits this bar right here, okay? So it should look like that. And then we'll do a quick inspection here, of course. Clean up the gear teeth with a brass wire brush. You can hose it down with some WD-40, and then we go back with our blue grease accordingly. Okay. I also do just a small drop of oil in here on the shaft, and then as well as inside here. Okay. And again, that's spring loaded. Okay. And then when you're ready, just go back in with this piece, basically. Line up your holes. It can only go one way. All right. And then here, you basically just have to hold everything in place while you put the rest of this back together. Okay. So, we've got our pieces and parts. We've cleaned everything up the best that we can. We'll start with putting our cam back. Okay. Washer. Really, really small washers with that. You can tell just how thin these are. Sometimes it helps to have magnetic tips for that kind of stuff, as you can see. And we got our snap ring here. The snap ring is going to go back like so. And I do find that it's helpful having some needle nose here. Snap it back on like so. Okay, and then we've cleaned up our drive shaft here with 4.0 steel wool and some WD-40. Okay, and then we basically will just go back with that blue grease and just do a hint of it here, all up and down that. Place it back in. Line up our holes down here at the base. Okay, and then we got our pin, our set pin, if you will. And that's going to go back in like so. Okay. And then we'll go back with our plate and badge. Doesn't hurt to apply a couple of drops of oil to these threads, like so. Longer ones go here and here. Shorter one goes here. And we'll screw those back in accordingly. So as you can see, this reel isn't too difficult to work on when you don't have to go busting apart a bunch of rusted parts, basically, and you just have to use caution when you do that. I have taken apart some reels before, and the parts are just so rusted that they end up breaking. And with a reel like this, if a part breaks, your chances of recovering it, like another spring or screw or something like that, it's probably pretty slim, or a main drive shaft for that matter, or pinion gear, any of that stuff, because there's just not a lot of these made. And I don't know if there's a lot of interchangeable parts with this reel and other reels that they've made. So you just want to use caution when you're getting into that kind of stuff, okay? All right, so we're going to try this out. Anti-reverse is working good. Spins freely. Real nice. Looks like we might need to do just a little bit more Real-X oil here on this bail to make it fire right. There we go. Okay. And then our drag, make sure that it's working. Turn that knob and it tightens up. Loosen it back up. It's nice and loose. So there you have it. That is the Damn Quick Royale MDS 2500, all serviced and ready to go, or to put on display for that matter. So thanks again for watching. This is Tony with Back on the Bench. If you liked the video, please do give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please make sure you do subscribe. Hit the notification button. That way you will be getting all the updates as to when there are new videos coming out, and I've got quite a few more to come up on the bench here shortly, so stay tuned for that, and we'll see you next time.